and welcome back to the CODESHO podcast,
How's it
everybody.
going?
What's going on, buddy? How you doing?
Oh yeah, I'm doing great. I'm excited.
I'm really excited about this episode. Basically, what we're going to want to talk about here is artificial intelligence. But before we get into that, I want to kind of pick your brain on something.
Okay.
So, Joe Rogan, just either yesterday or the day before, he had a podcast with David Cho. Did you see it, or do you know who he is?
I didn't see it, and I don't know who he is.
Okay, so David Cho, I didn't really know much about him either whenever I watched it, but I'm out of breath. I was all running around before we jumped in here. David Cho is a painter. He's just an artist.
Okay.
No, I shouldn't say he's just an artist. He's a fantastic artist. He seems pretty hard on himself, but that's kind of beside the point. I think most artists are. A lot of what's the word? Eclectic or whatever, eccentric artists tend to be, it seems like a lot of them are kind of dark, or not dark, but really hard on themselves. Anyways, the point is, he was saying, basically, he was telling Joe, when somebody gets really good at something, especially like painting, have you ever seen a painting where it looks like just crazy? Like, you're like, that doesn't even look that impressive. Like that, what is that?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, where if I think that I can do it, then I think it's not high quality.
Yeah, like they'll just like slap paint around and throw.
Yeah, it's like, okay, that I don't care for that.
Yeah, so I never understood why that was considered like really artistic or why it required some crazy artist to do it, but he kind of explained why to Joe, and I thought it was really cool because I feel like in a way it applies towards our conversation today, but it also applies to programming a little bit. He basically said when painters begin, they paint things that we see in the world.
Technical, like they're. I think I know exactly where you're going. Like they're looking for technical mastery versus like exploration of emotions or something like that.
Kinda, yeah. He basically says like not anybody, but like it's expected that a painter can paint a sunset. It's expected that a painter can paint a house.
Yeah, the house should be proportional. Like the body should be like. That's why like my wife's an artist. She learned a lot about anatomy, and so like technical like painting skill, she's very good. She can do some pretty. Yeah. So okay. So I understand that.
So you get that part. So he basically says, at some point when a painter becomes so well known, and this guy he's very, very well known in the painting world. And he says whenever you get so good at it that like you have this like, especially if you're obsessive about it. Like there are like obsessive painters. There's like recreational painters, but he's like an obsessive professional painter. And he says he's so obsessive that you eventually get to the point where you're like, this isn't enough. Like, I can paint anything in the world. I can paint a picture of things that people are used to seeing, but it just doesn't satisfy me because I know that people can do that. There's nothing, you don't see that. You might think it's a beautiful painting, but you don't see that and think like, that's revolutionary. You just think, damn, he's a really good painter. So he says that what happens is artists get to a point where they just get so deep in their head, like I have to create something so ahead of what's available right now, so outside of the box that I'm just going to start like creating the craziness in my head on canvas. Like whatever I don't know, whatever is going on in your head, like I'm just going to, in whatever way possible, throw that on the canvas. And some people can understand that, which is why sometimes that paint is worth so much money.
Well, this is why I'm going to get the names wrong, but like there is history of this. Like, this is obviously why I think it was maybe Van Gogh who did abstract painting. Like he was like, or whoever, I forget the history, but whoever did that first abstract like painting, it doesn't look like a person, but that doesn't mean that artist couldn't draw like a photo or like realistic person.
Sure.
And then there's the other ones with like, it's like famous, like the dripping clock. And it's like, it's that same thing. It's like, let's push the style, or let's push what it means to be art. Cause it's like, I can draw a clock.
Yeah.
Like, what do they call it? Still life. I can draw a bowl of fruit. What if that bowl of fruit was not realistic? What if it was melting because blah blah blah?
What if it had an emotion infused in it? That was kind of the whole thing, was he's basically saying like a lot of times art does inspire emotion or draw emotion out of people, but it's not until you really start manipulating reality with emotion, like a dripping clock or like a Starry Night. Van Gogh did like a Starry Night. It doesn't look real at all, but it invokes an emotion,
there's an emotion to it,
because there's an emotion infused with it. And so anyways, he it got a little weird. Like you can watch it later.
I should check it out.
He does some strange stuff because he was also a podcaster, and he said that like just interviewing people, even interesting people. He was actually a really big podcaster, and he said it just didn't do it for him anymore. So he started doing like weird stuff. Like he would like, this is off the rails of this conversation, but he like would try to do a whole podcast episode where he would talk in, not in tongues, but they call that something, glossa something. I don't know. It's the idea that like people can speak a language that doesn't exist and like just kind of like mumble stuff. So anyways, this is what he does. He masters things and then he just has to take it to some extreme level or whatever. So he, was mostly talking about that in the form of art. And he even told Joe, he says, like, you've revolutionized podcasts by doing this in the format that you do, interviewing the people that you do.
Well, yeah.
And you're so good at it that, like, nobody can compete. Like, nobody's as good at casually talking to people and getting people to talk as you.
Yeah.
So that's, like, the revolutionary thing for that art. But to me, this happens in programming, too.
Yeah. I can see that.
That's kind of
right
that's the connection I'm trying to make is, like, people are always going to want to push the boundaries of programming. And so it's like, well, at some point somebody said like, yeah, I can keep creating code and I can keep making programs that do things and I can make it smarter and I can make it I can make it handle more input and output, more number crunching, more whatever. But at the end of the day, that type of software can only, not that it can only go so far, but it's not, I don't even want to say that it's not impressive because it is impressive, but it's not revolutionary. Like just calculating more is not impressive anymore. Yeah. And so what people are doing is they're really getting outside of the boundaries of what software was designed to do, which is accept input from users and give output. And now they're saying, let's make this thing smart. Like let's make it capable of learning.
Yeah.
And we're obviously on the very beginning of this whatever you want to call it, like phase of programming, this new era of programming. But it's really cool because I don't know what's next. I don't know. I don't want to talk too much about that today because who knows where it could go. Yeah. But I do think that's interesting that he brings up a point, and immediately when he was talking about it in the form of painting, I just drew that connection to programming because we do that too. We're always trying to push the boundaries, creating new architectures. That's your thing.
Yeah. That's exactly, as you were talking about this, that's exactly what I thought about. Like, one of the things I really like to do is I like to look at my own code. Obviously, like as I'm reading other books, I'm looking at their code and deciding like, okay, like could I do that? Let me understand it. Like how can I incorporate that into what I'm doing? But yeah, like I like to look at, let's say like an app, like the architecture, the foundation, or like a game engine that I've built, and I go, okay, well how can I do it better? And like better might mean like connecting these two things like smarter or whatever, or just, I mean, really that is what a lot of programming is. Like I can write these 10 instructions to operate on this data, and then I need these same 10 instructions to operate on this other set of data. Well, let's put it in a function.
Yeah.
Right? And then like let's wrap that up into a class. And then like let's, so like that, and that's where some of that fun is for me, is that like, okay, we can write the code, but how can we write it smarter? Or one of the things that I do like doing is, and this goes towards, like you said, like making it smarter. I like writing code that knows how to write code.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so like for our apps, we don't get to do that much, but sometimes we are like writing build scripts or whatever that will help with that process.
Talk a little bit about like an example.
So I built this one game engine, and like it was all in C++. And you can add like these pre-build scripts, like you can just attach it like, or like post-build scripts or whatever. So you can attach some process, like a batch file or something, after it compiles. So one of the things that I would do, like you're making a game engine, so you're writing all these different components for behavior, for like, it's like, that is like the AI, right? So I don't have a tool, but like you have to write this class for like, okay, this is like a chase behavior, this is like a swarm behavior or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. So I would make it so after it would compile all that stuff, one of the problems is that kind of sucks, like if you want to now read that, like, so I didn't have a tool, but it was also like you could define behavior in a file. So you could say, okay, here's a zombie, I want him to have like chase behavior and swarm behavior, right? And that's all just in a text file. Mm-hmm. But there was nothing necessarily that would associate the string in this text file to that class.
Okay.
right? And so the way that you would do it is like have an enum. So like in languages like Kotlin or Swift, like you can have the enum associated with a string. Like Swift does it automatically,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is really cool. C++ still doesn't have
Well,
that.
okay, yeah, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
So you can write that as well, but that means that every time you write a class, you also have to update that stupid enum and the switch statement. So what I would do is post build after everything's already. I guess it would have been pre-build. It would scan the files. It would look for like blah blah component, and then it would automatically generate those enums and automatically generate those like switch statements.
That's really cool.
Yeah, so that then it could just read the file and it would just work. So like you as the programmer, all you need to do is write your classes and then it will work.
I don't know if it's. I don't. Well, I'm not sure that it's writing code. In fact, I know that it's not. It's not doing exactly what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. But the Laravel framework is pretty impressive for a similar reason, which is that like it can draw conclusions based off of really. I don't want to say like obscure things, but not programmatic things. Like just having a name of a function be written a certain way, it can like automatically know what you're trying to do with that thing, and so that's pretty cool. I don't know. I mean, obviously, neither of these things are AI. You had kind of said though that that's the AI portion of it. What do you mean by that?
What? Oh, I don't
Well,
know. What do you mean?
First, what's your definition of AI? Because
yeah.
I feel like before you answer, I feel like a lot of people will say things like, "Well, Alexa is AI."
Okay. So I'm not an expert here, but I did take some AI classes in, like when I was in school. I think the easiest definition is, and this is like actually in games, it's kind of funny because AI isn't necessarily AI. AI is if statements. So it's like the most basic definition is like the computer makes some choices. The computer is making decisions based off of the inputs. Obviously, like if else statements, that's pretty weak version of AI because there's not necessarily like any kind of learning going on. So that's, to me, that's like the next step, is if the computer can learn based off of those inputs. So actually, I wrote this cool in the AI class. I wrote this cool. It was just a simulation because there's like you couldn't play it, but it was these little dots, and the dots had 3 weapons. One was like Wolverine claws, one was a shotgun, and one was a sniper rifle. Obviously, it's like close combat, short range, long range. Mm-hmm. And so the AI bot would go around, and like at first it knows nothing, and so it would just choose it because everything's like weighted at 0 or whatever. So it would go around, and it would, as soon as it spots somebody within its range, it would pick a weapon at random at first, and then try to attack. So obviously, if somebody's far away and it tries to attack with the claws, that's 0% success rate, right? Mm-hmm. And so then it would learn based off of, again, very, very simplistic. Yeah, but it was like, okay, based on this distance, I was this % successful. So then that starts factoring in. Obviously, like at short range, the Wolverine claws would kill right away, right? So it's like, oh, that's 100% success rate. At short range, the sniper rifle is maybe less good because like people can move faster than whatever, or like at medium range or whatever. So the ideal situation is, short range is the claws, like medium range was shotgun, long range was sniper rifle, something like that. And you could watch these bars kind of go up. It was a fun project.
I think you hit the nail on the head though a minute ago when you said that like a lot of games claim that your enemy or whatever is AI, but I don't really think that it's AI. Like not by what by what my definition would be. Yeah. To me, AI I don't know if it's ever been defined like this before, but this is how I look at it. True AI is a program or set of software that is able to make decisions off of historical data. And that historical part is really important because a lot of people will say like, well, this thing can make decisions, therefore it's AI. If it's making decisions at runtime without looking at historical data, that's not really AI. It's just a program. That's
just a program.
It's just handling input and output.
Yeah. My Android app and your iOS app right now makes decisions based off of user input.
Yes.
Like, but I wouldn't call anything about our app AI.
It's not looking at any historical data to make decisions.
Yeah.
Case in point, there was, or not case in point, but an example of this is there was a guy that you know the little dinosaur game that you play on Chrome when you have no internet or whatever.
I never actually knew that was a game. I know what you're talking about.
You didn't know it was a game?
Yeah, I didn't know. Somebody told me recently.
Oh yeah. If you like don't have any internet and you press the space bar, there like a dinosaur will run. You got to jump over cactuses.
I think I've seen the dinosaur. I just didn't know that it did. Anyway.
Yeah. If you press, anyways, well, it's kind of funny if you. Let's see if we can pull it up real quick.
How do you fake? Oh, I was gonna say, how do you fake Chrome not working?
I'm just gonna Google it. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like. Come on. T-Rex run. Ooh, activate bot. I wonder if that's what that is. So anyways, yeah, the little guy will start running, and then you'll have like a cactus come along. I already died. But you gotta jump over the cactuses, and then there'll be like little birds, and you gotta duck under them. Anyways, the point is that there was a guy that he made an AI, and basically the way he programmed it was game over is bad. You lose. We're not trying to do that. And the first, like, he shows like a time lapse of this dinosaur running, and in the beginning it's awful. I mean, it's just like all it knows how to do is jump, and it knows how to like read the screen for like what is on screen, whatever. But in the very beginning, it's like jumping at the wrong time. It's not jumping everything. It's just smacking it. And then over time, it's able to use that historical data of what didn't work to decide, oh, I'm actually supposed to be like jumping over.
I'm going to do something different.
Yeah. That is AI. That is actually AI. That thing, from the moment you started running it until the end, was more intelligent or better at solving the problem.
It learned how to do the thing. Yeah.
It learned how to do the thing. And so I just like when people say like, oh, Alexa is AI, I'm just like, it's really not. Just because it knows your name, that's just a program. It just handled the input and then it's giving you an output. That's not AI.
My Hello World program can know your name if you tell me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we even have an app on the course where you make a little Hello World. It'll learn your name.
It'll learn your name.
But that's not AI, and we shouldn't confuse it, because to me it's very important to separate the two. Old software just handles input, output, does logic at runtime, doesn't really do anything with historical data. It's not until, and also maybe it's important to note that not only does it need to use historical data to make decisions, but it also needs to get better at the thing that it does. That's pretty important too. If it's not getting better at the thing that it's doing, it can be looking at historical data all day long, but it's in the name artificial intelligence. It needs to be gaining intelligence.
Yeah.
So that's important. A lot of people think that AI is, the people that understand it, I guess, are really afraid that it's going to like take over the world and could destroy humanity. Maybe so. I kind of want to talk to you about that a little bit. But I do think, not that we shouldn't be concerned about it. And I could be wrong here. I've been wrong about a lot of things in life. But I just don't see that happening in our lifetime. I don't see that even being the case 100 or even maybe, I don't want to say 200, maybe 200 years from now, but like 100 years from now, I just don't see that being the case. It's so far away. Like, just as a programmer, the amount of infuriating things that we have to deal with that are so small is like, man, we've got a really, really long way to go before this is possible.
Here's programmer humor. Think about for how long people were programming. Like in C came out in like the 70s, and it, you have to have a semicolon at the end of every statement. It wasn't until 2014. I don't know. Obviously, I don't know every single language, but like 2014, Swift came out, and they were like, you don't need semicolons.
Yeah, we don't need that.
And again, I understand that there's other languages, so that's just an example. And the fact is, C still requires it. C# still requires it, right? Oh, you got to have a semicolon.
And I mean, they're still updating those languages. So
they're still updating the languages. They could say like, you don't need that.
That would probably be weird though, as an update to remove something as foundational as that. But your point is very valid.
That's fair. But I mean, that's the thing is like nobody. Okay, well then that was in the 70s. So let's say that doesn't count. But like, when did PHP come out? When did Ruby come out?
Yeah,
right? Like there's still so many of these languages that they just, I don't know if they did it because maybe they did it because you always had to do it. And
It might have also had something to do with the fact that in the beginning, a lot of these languages had like one pass compilers versus Swift having a multi-pass compiler, which allows it to do things that you can't do with a single pass. I know we talked about this. I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast, but we talked about it before. Because you were telling me that you didn't really. Was it you that told me that you didn't know that like Swift was a multi-pass, or was that somebody else?
I mean, I didn't know that.
Yeah, because if you think about it, like certain things, like for example, I don't want to dive too much into this example, but we had a thing where you could basically say in Swift you can put like an array with inferred enum values, and then after the array you can say I don't want to go too deep into the example because it's kind of hard to explain without showing, but it's basically able, because of the fact that it does a multi-pass, it's able to say like, okay, I see at the end of this code what the thing is that we're trying to infer, I'll go ahead and give you credit for that or whatever.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So anyways, but before maybe it was a little bit harder to do some of the cool syntactic sugar because of the fact that they were just single pass compilers.
Yeah, but the reason that C had a the reason that C had a semicolon is because that signified the end of a statement. Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting that nobody wrote additional compilers to say, well, okay, but also a line break could mean that. Again, like different languages do it differently.
Some languages are also like intended to be C is not one of them, but some of them can be like JavaScript.
JavaScript is
needs to be minified in production environments, so it does need it for that. But most of the minifiers, the majority of the time, can assume where to put semicolons based on line breaks or whatever. Yeah. But even Swift having like in conditions, in the condition of an if statement, you don't have to put like parentheses around it. That also seems like a no-brainer. Like the parentheses are kind of pointless because if you've got if and then a brace, whatever's between that is the condition.
But yeah, the difference is this is interesting about. So that just seems like a really simple choice. It's an either or, because Swift doesn't require those parentheses, but it does require the braces. That's the only language that I know of that requires the curly braces, even if there's a single statement. C, Java, C#, obviously C++, Objective-C, it was all the same thing. It required the parentheses, but not the braces. Mm-hmm. Now, you can decide if you think one is better than the other.
In Kotlin, can't you have multiple statements?
Yeah, but then you need to put the braces. So the traditional way that the if statement works is you say if, parentheses, there's my expression, and then the next line is the thing that's part of the condition, right?
Yeah.
And it just so happens in these C-style languages, if you put the curly braces, that signifies a single statement. It's like a group of statements as a single thing.
Yep.
Right. So that's why that works. In Swift, they said, you know what? It's probably better and safer. We require those curly braces, but because of that, we don't need these parentheses.
Swift did make a lot of decisions like that about safety, making sure that things are.
Well, that's again, you can decide what you think is better or not, but there has been a lot of bugs in the world, and I've done some of them where, maybe not recently, but I remember that there's been times where I tried to add a second statement to an if statement, being stupid, and it bit me.
Yeah, that's a good point. Just adding that extra line. Plus, sometimes it makes it easier to read. I'm pretty big on that in my code. Like, I want it to be easy to read. I don't want to like make it all. Some people write code that's just so hard to understand. Anyways, but the more interesting thing here is the evolution going to AI, which, like I said from the beginning, that's just the next step that humans are taking. And so here's the thing. People always worry that, like, AI is going to phase out jobs, and more specifically, it's going to phase out programmer jobs eventually. Like, it's first going to take over, like, low-skill jobs, but eventually it could take over programming as well. Here's why I don't think that's going to happen. I don't know what programming will be like in the future. I'm sure it will look nothing like it looks now. But the reason I don't think that's possible is because if you take something like Pong was insanely hard to make when they made it.
They had to draw each pixel. You had to go through and light up each pixel.
A feat of very impressive engineering that they were able to do that and have like the physics of it. Crazy. But now you can make Pong in probably just a couple hours. Like with the tools we have now, it's so much easier.
Yeah, I would imagine I haven't used like Sprite Kit like you did, but like if you wanted to use Sprite Kit, how long do you think that would take you?
Yeah, you could do it in less than a day for sure.
Yeah.
And it probably pissed the people off that made it to know that
Yeah.
maybe. But the point I'm trying to make here is it's not like we advanced the tools and said, well, we're just going to keep making the things that we've already made. No, every company wants to have the next best thing.
That's yeah. So exactly what you're saying. Okay, so we can make Pong. Like it used to take 3 weeks or 10 weeks or however long it took to
Probably
code.
took a year maybe.
Maybe, right? Because they had to build the hardware as well, right? And so now we can build it in less than a day. You can probably build it, if you know how to use Unity, you can probably build it in an hour.
Oh, yeah,
or,
probably.
Or less, right? Okay, but the thing is nobody wants Pong anymore.
Yeah, nobody wants Pong.
That's exactly what you're saying. But, so we can build Pong, because the tools have gotten better. We can build Pong in an hour. Nobody wants Pong. People want Far Cry. I almost said Half-Life.
Yeah.
Far Cry 6.
And Half-Life. There's new Half-Life too.
Possibly. They're probably always working on stuff. But yeah, like that's the difference, right? We can build Pong faster. We got better tools. People didn't lose jobs. It created more jobs because people say, okay, well, I want Pong 2. I want Pong 3. I want Far Cry 6. I want Far Cry 128. Whatever.
And to be able to do that, we need to improve the tools that we have to build that stuff. But yeah, I'm sure like all these game designers and developers and stuff, they must be sitting around a table when the Rockstar team, when the Ubisoft team comes out with Far Cry, they're looking at like one cool little thing, like, oh dang, like we don't have that. Like, we got to do that.
Yeah.
So people are always trying to push forward. So I'm just thinking that like there's always going to have to be that human element with AI to. It's hard because like maybe AI could get smart enough to analyze human behavior and decide what's next and help build it. But it seems like we're so far away from AI being able to understand all of the senses of a human and all of the emotions of a human. I'm not even sure how you program emotion into. It's not that we can't do it. Like, because I know people who are Sam Harris or whoever might be like, this guy's an idiot if he says that we couldn't. Maybe we could. We're just so far from that. I was even thinking the other day, think about cooking, which doesn't seem like a difficult task. It's definitely not it's not one of the more difficult things that humans do. It can be. Like, it can be a crazy art. But to be able to appreciate food and understand what taste, you have to be able to taste.
Yeah.
And that's a very complex biological thing that's happening. I have no clue how you could teach a computer of wires and metal how to taste something.
So yeah, So
and everybody's taste buds are different. So it's like.
So going off of the cooking example, because I absolutely agree. You can have a computer or a robot flip burgers. Mm-hmm. You can teach it to, again, you can call that cooking if you want. Maybe that's the difference between a cook and a chef, right? So you might be able to replace the cook aspect. Okay, well, we don't need a burger flipper anymore because we have this machine that perfectly flips this burger given these
Give
inputs.
me a recipe, I'll make it.
Yeah, but that is different. And to me, it's the exact same thing. Okay, well, if I can get a cheap burger at McDonald's, why would I ever pay $15 or $30 or whatever for a burger somewhere else? Well,
yeah.
But people do. Why would they do that?
Yeah.
Why would they do that?
Steaks too. I mean, everything.
Steaks too.
You can go get high quality of any food.
Because it's
even French fries. You could probably go get really good truffle fries or something.
Yeah. And the reason is because we can get the computer to do that thing, but now then humans want more, right? If they're starving, they'll eat that burger. But if they're more well off, like, oh, I saved up my money so I can get a really good tasting burger. And we all know that the flavor of that really good burger, and it's not McDonald's. No offense, McDonald's. I've eaten there before too, but it's like
they're not trying to be a 5-star restaurant.
That's not what they're trying to do. That's why my wife went to the Gordon Ramsay. He has like a burger place here at Planet Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where it's at.
Oh yeah. I think you're right. I think
it's like in that mile, whatever.
Yeah.
She went there and she said it was good and the fries were good. It was expensive, so she went because her friends came to visit here. But yeah, like, okay, why would you pay $50 for a burger and fries if you can go to McDonald's and get it? It's the same thing.
Plus, the other thing is let's talk about like the utopian society where AI can serve every single necessary thing for humans. It can make houses, it can build cars, it can transport you, it can cook you food, it can
Star Trek. You're
Star
talking about
Trek.
Star Trek. Yeah.
Let's talk about that, because a lot of people think like, well, that's a lot of people are very terrified of that, because then they say like, well, what happens to money? What happens to people that want to work? What happens to like if my dream is to be a nurse, how can I do that if I'm replaced by whatever? And what I think is that what will happen is people, the value of things is obviously just supply and demand, and that's never going to change. As far as I'm concerned, it doesn't seem like that will ever change. People want things that other people can't have. And so even if AI can build and do everything that we need it to do, you're going to be willing to pay more money for a handmade bicycle because they're more rare. The fact that a human made that is more rare. And I'm not just trying to like, sometimes it frustrates me when people talk about AI and they always say that like, if you go get a burger from McDonald's, it's better if like a human made it than a robot. I'm not so sure about that, but I will say that like eventually having just a manufactured bike from a robot is not as personal or as valuable or rare as one that was made by a human. It just won't, especially like I think in when utopian society takes over, if it does, like antique stuff will probably be super popular because people are just that's what they're gonna want. They're gonna want the robots to do the things that are mundane and
I'm not an expert on this either, but I was reading a book. It's still that So Good They Can't Ignore You, and he's talking about this guy Al Merrick, who's like a surfboard shaper, and it seems like these days we could have robots precise shaping surfboards, but I still don't think that happens because I still think like having having somebody who's a craftsman like building that, like the pros want it tweaked for themselves. They don't want it cookie cutter. They want it tweaked so that it fits them exactly, and I think that's what you're talking about with the bike as well.
Yeah. I just it's something about humans that there's like, since we're such emotional creatures, it's like people find a lot of value in having that, I don't know, human connection, whether that's, I mean, even in medicine, like, even if robots can replace nurses and stuff, like, or doctors do surgery, like having a human there to talk to you and to make you feel better in your room, like I just don't think that's ever going to be replaced. And like with the whole programmer thing, I think that humans will always be a step ahead of AI. And I know that's probably laughable to a lot of people because I'm sure someday it will become so smart that it's way smarter than we are. But at the end of the day, we are not concerned about the livelihood of the AI. We're concerned about the livelihood of ourselves. Yeah. And so even if that's leagues ahead of us, what's important to it will not be important to us. And I think we will always direct the AI or direct the tools that we use to create the society in the way that we want, because we are who we are. You know what I mean? Like,
So, like, because we had talked about this in like a previous conversation, because we were talking about so in that book Linchpin, the whole purpose of that book is like, be that person in your company that everyone needs, right? And part of that point is like, of course, companies are always going to try to make a cookie cutter process that can be repeatable, because then they can save money. But the problem is then if you can get a cookie cutter process, somebody else can copy your cookie cutter process, and then now it's a race to the bottom on price. And so he talks about like, become that artist, become that like that human aspect. There's obviously a reason why people like Apple more, and it's not necessarily specs. It's not necessarily computer specs. There's something about, and obviously Steve Jobs knew it. That's why they had the whole Think Different campaign and all of that stuff. It wasn't just about having a better computer, because you can buy a better computer for the price that you paid for this. You can buy a spec-wise a better computer.
Sure.
Like more gigabytes, more, So, but people are buying it for that feeling.
It's about that experience.
It's about that experience, and that's true about food as well. And like, we go back to that. Like, okay, we could have computers doing the farming and cooking the food, but then somebody's still going to say, Well, I mean, there's even that quote, variety is the spice of life, right? But it's like, so if I can always have this burger and, maybe all these multi flavors, somebody else is going to say, well, I've got it. I've got this thing. I want you to try this thing. And it's that experimentation that, I mean, maybe, I mean, I'm not saying computers can't do that, but is it going to be the same? And I'm just not sure if it is going to be the same.
I think the reason it wouldn't be the same is because, well, I took a class on AI theory in college, and I remember one thing that they had talked about was, I can't remember what they called it, but it's like something box theory or something like that. Mm-hmm. Basically, if you take a human and you put him in a box, and for, I don't know, the first 20 years of his life or something, all the way through adulthood, maturing, puberty, whatever, you put him in this box, and every day you just put like bread under the door, and it's a white room, there's no color, there's nothing, and you just give him bread every single day. On the 20th year, if you decide to let him outside, and there's all of these, what do we call them, like stimulus, whatever, there's all of this stuff, there's trees and birds and sounds and smells and sight, like that human will feel something. There's going to be something inside of him going, like all of these different hormones, all these different chemicals going crazy in his brain. He's going to feel a certain way about all of that stuff. If you do the same thing with a robot, it won't be that way. Like there's not going to be any feeling. There might be some kind of like, see, the problem is I wish that I had somebody on here that disagreed with that, because I know there are people, and I'm open to their thoughts on that, but I just don't understand.
Well, yeah. So this is the interesting thing, because we're sitting here as just maybe like low level software developers.
Yeah.
But Elon Musk thinks that, like, he would disagree with us. He thinks
that it could be like conscious.
Yeah, and that's fair. I mean, yeah. So okay, I at least understand that argument. In that book, Ender's Game, the second book, they basically it's 3,000 years in the future, and they make this. They figure out this ability to communicate, to send signals faster than light, right? Or like as fast as light or something. Oh no, it's faster than light. It's instantaneous communication. So they have all these network all over like this entire like galaxy, and then so that works like nodes in a brain, and this communication system becomes conscious, and it chooses to talk with Ender. But yeah, so it's like, so some people do recognize that it is true that we are just hardware. We're like squishy hardware, right? I guess I shouldn't say it is true. It certainly depends on like your
it's so hard to say, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, like if you're obviously like for some people, and I'm not disputing this, like they think that there is that spark, that soul, and that's okay. That very well could be. Obviously, I don't have the answer to that.
Yeah.
So where does that come from? We don't know. Some people think that some people think it just comes from, it's like the emergent behavior of our hardware. Our brains are so complex, and like all of these things firing, like all of like the neurons firing, that the emergent behavior is that we have consciousness.
Yep.
And so the idea, if that is true, is that if we could build a system just as complex that knows how to grow itself, which like an electronic network potentially could, then...
Do you think so? It's so hard to say, right?
Yeah.
Because all that we can do is look at what we do know. When we talk about these conversations, it's important to know, especially if we talk about philosophy on this channel or just in general, when physicists talk about philosophy or whatever, like it's important to only talk about what we do know.
Yeah.
And one of the unfortunate things about consciousness, we were talking about this the other day, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole with this because I definitely don't want anybody to like not like this, but the only truth that we do know is that you can't even prove that anything is conscious except yourself, I suppose. That's all you can do, right? And we can try to figure out what is and what isn't, and it's easy to look at something like us, even a dog, and say like, well, that is conscious too, because it obviously feels somewhat like I do. It feels these senses, whatever. But the reality is that you can't even prove that. So when it comes to determining whether or not a computer is conscious, one, I wonder, what does it matter? I know a lot of people worry about this, like a lot of people debate whether it would or wouldn't be. I'm not really sure why it matters, because at the end of the day, I guess it doesn't even really matter if another living being is or isn't. It shouldn't affect the way that you interact with the world. I mean, the way that the world responds and reacts to you is going to be the same regardless of whether it is or isn't. So I do think we need to be careful with AI, but I'm not really sure why it matters. I mean, why do you think people are so obsessed about that? Why do people care so much about that topic? And why is consciousness? See, I always wonder. We were made as humans to be pretty smart. Like, we can solve complex problems. We definitely understand physics. We're like the only species that does. We observe the world, try to understand how it works. So, but we cannot figure that one out. That's a tough one.
So you want to know why people think it's important?
One, why do people think it's important to talk about whether or not AI is or isn't conscious? Why does it matter? It's capable of what it's capable of either way. And two, why is this such a? Why are humans so obsessed with this? Is it just because we don't understand it?
I don't. Yeah, I don't know the second one, but I think I know the first one. And this has become a really fun episode because it always goes down a different direction. I think it's ethics, right?
Okay.
If I smash, well, this is your cup and not my cup, but like if I smash this cup against the wall, except for the fact that I broke your cup, there's no ethical problem there. Like, or like, if I break my own iPhone, there's no ethical problem, right? But if I go and I see a dog in the street and I kick that dog, everyone's going to think like, well, there's an ethical problem. What are you doing? Like, that dog feels something.
Mm-hmm.
And so if like they do actually talk about this, like they hit on this a lot even in Star Trek. Like Star Trek: The Next Generation had that character Data, who was like artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had debates. Like the Federation acted like, well, he was as much their property as one of the starships, and then like Jean-Luc Picard argued against it. Says no, he's alive, he's conscious, he's not property of, like, he's an independent being. And so yeah, like I think, and that was like, obviously that is the philosophy of all of those Star Trek shows. They're out there looking for life, and so it's like, what constitutes life? And so that's what I think. If we had a computer, or if we had a cup that, I mean, obviously we cut down trees. No one disputes that trees are alive, but they're not conscious, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
that's pretty much unanimously agreed on.
Yeah, I mean, what else would we do if we couldn't eat trees or like plants, and we couldn't eat animals? Like, there's just nothing.
Yeah.
Rocks. But like, but yeah. So that's where I think it comes in. If there was a computer that became self-aware, it becomes an ethics thing. Like, should I turn it off? I have to treat it differently.
I see.
Like, yeah.
Okay. Let me piggyback on that. So I've been thinking about this. You and I had a dumb conversation the other day about whether or not ants are conscious, and I think we both kind of think no. Here's why, and I think it has a lot to do with what you just said. I think a conscious being is aware of what hurts and helps it and makes it feel good, and therefore, because of how bad it feels, for example, to have something, I don't know, bad happen to you, you don't want to see that happen to something else because it sucks. And so you are making decisions with consideration for other beings like you.
Yeah.
Ants don't do that. They definitely don't do that. Like, an ant is never going to come comfort you if it sees that you're upset about something. A dog, like, really will. A dog, if it sees you upset, like, our dogs will, if my wife's really upset about something, like, they'll come right over because they know what it's like to be sad.
Yeah.
So they're going to come over. And so I think what you're saying ties right into that, which is that if AI is conscious, then we do need to be a little bit more considerate of its feelings because we know what it's like to be hurt, and therefore it could be hurt as well. But is it reasonable to assume that the creators of whatever the next generation of AI is won't program it to be emotional? Because I feel like that's better, right? Wouldn't we want our AI to be a logical... We want to not subsidize, but we want to supplement our logic capability, not necessarily our emotional capability.
Yeah. I mean, I would hope so, and I agree with you. I think that... So I read this somewhere else as well. Like, we all know that AI is like really smart at chess, right? Like Deep Blue, it learned chess and like won like grandmaster status in like some short amount of time, 28 or 48 hours or whatever, right? I was reading this other book though. So in general, it seems like computers are better at chess than people. Because they can analyze so many moves. So like, that doesn't mean that people suck. It just means that like computers and people are, in my opinion, are better at different things. And there's this book called Range where he's talking about how, kind of going against what we said in a previous episode, like being a generalist can be really beneficial because you're gaining experience from all these different things. Anyway, one of the things that he says is, while it's true that a computer is better than a person at chess, a computer plus a person can't be beat. So like the computer's crunching the numbers, but like
chess?
At chess, yeah.
Really? Why is that?
So a computer plus a person beats a computer every time.
Why is that?
Because
And what does that mean?
Because the computer is still crunching the numbers and possibly giving suggestions. Like maybe there's like, here's a couple of suggestions, and then the person is now looking at maybe like a larger picture, like pulling from experience, pulling from like different pictures. So it's not just about crunching numbers. It's like maybe even like planning ahead in a different way. And I forget how they described it in the book, but like that's the best. And so I think this is where kind of going back to well, we didn't exactly hit on automation, but we were talking about like, would AI ever like replace us? Or, so like even us as computers, or sorry, even us as programmers. The thing is, this has been happening, and this is exactly what we were talking about. The tools are better. Like we can make Pong in an hour now, and so like the compilers are getting better, and they're pretty smart. But it still is going to take. I don't think there's ever going to be a situation where this is like the dream of people to say, oh, it'll be nice to be able to say, hey, make me a fitness app, or like, hey, make me like an Uber app or whatever, right? Like make me an app that's like Uber but for babysitters. And it's like there's still so many questions involved in that. Okay, like how are you going to connect to your database? How are you going to do this? And the thing is, even if it was smart enough to get that surface level, like to answer those really basic questions, if everybody can do it, then nobody cares.
Yeah.
And that also goes back to kind of like what you were saying.
Well, it'll probably be the sort of situation where, like you said, it's going to be a supplemental tool. So if you want to build this Uber app, you're going to like Jarvis is going to be like, okay, well, let's build the login page. What do you want? Yeah. What do you want to do here? And you're like, well, I kind of want this like red background with these like black buttons. And he's going to be like, okay, I've mocked up 20 different ones. Yeah. Tell me kind of what direction you want to go. And then from that, he'll compile another one. That probably is going to be real in the not too distant future. Yeah. Maybe even, I don't know, 30 years, 40 years from now, maybe something like that will definitely be possible. But yeah, like you said, I mean, we're building AI for us. It's not, I mean, we're not building AI to advance itself. We're building AI to make our lives better, to advance humans, to get us the things that we want, to get us the places that we want to go. And so the driver will always be us. Yeah. We're never going to like, I don't know if AI might just take, I mean, because like the concern is that it's like the anthill example where when humans build a house, we have no desire to hurt ants. We're not going out to go kill them. Like we're definitely not torturing them for no reason. But if we want to build a house here and there's an anthill, we will pay no mind to that anthill. It will not care. So if our task is too broad, we're just not, like the task of a human building the house isn't build a house and preserve all life in the process. That's not the goal. So we have to make sure when we build AI that we are very specific about what we want accomplished. Yeah. And at the core of AI's job needs to be preserve human life and don't hurt them along the way.
Did you read iRobot? This is like literally like the
Yeah. But see, the thing is, not only does it need to preserve life along the way, but it also needs to, this is the hard part, this is where it like has to become conscious, or we have to teach it emotion, because not only do you want to preserve life, but we obviously want humans to be happy in the process. We don't want to make anybody mad or sad. Yeah. Or we want to mitigate that as much as possible. That's where it gets weird, because now it has to be able to interpret emotion.
Yeah. And another argument I heard a long, long time ago, somebody else was talking about AI, and he was saying like, if we try to build AI and build it with rules, so it's like we're trying to put it in a box. It says it's like, imagine if a blind deaf person was trying to build a prison for you. Like they're trying to put you in a prison. It's just like, the fact is, computers are so good, like their world is bits and bytes and stuff like that, right? And they can think so much faster than us. That is what they're good at, like crunching numbers. So like we might say, okay, here's this thing, but you're not allowed to connect to the internet. And it's like, that's like me trying to program an app that doesn't have a single bug. It's like, there's going to be a bug. So that's one of the reasons why people are afraid.
One thing you talk about is the compounding complexity of just programming in general. And I think that when we build AI, there has to be just a dummy, simple shut-off mode. Like, do not make that complicated. It needs to be like at the beginning of AI software, if manual shut-off, off, else da-da-da-da-da. No other complexity. It's gotta be so dummy simple that it cannot be messed up. If we need to shut it down, we shut it down.
Yeah, like we need the hardware button. That's why like iPhone has hardware buttons. They can't get rid of hardware buttons completely.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's in computers, there's two different types of interrupts. There's hardware and software interrupts. And what that means is obviously because these computers are running even multi-threaded, but like even if there's only a single thread, it's running all these programs so fast and switching in between them that it looks like it's real time, right? And so like that's why we can run multiple programs. There's a timer on the computers. That's a software interrupt, right? That says, okay, now after this timer clicks, give time, like take the current instruction, which is in Matt's program, give that back to the operating system. Now operating system says, okay, I'm going to switch these contexts, then I'm going to give that power back to the next program, right? So that's a software interrupt. Hardware interrupt is like buttons that you would press. Obviously, you can just press power on it or whatever, right? But that's like a whole different signal. The mouse is like a hardware interrupt. So like as these things move, it interprets that and it can do something else. So yeah, we would need that hardware interrupt off.
The problem is just the nature of the internet is very webbed, and I see AI not being like a physical thing the way that we imagine it to be. It's going to be a webbed thing, and it's going to be the sort of thing that like...
Well, and that's what that other guy talking about AI was saying. He was like, we're trying to put it we're like a blind deaf man trying to build, like, okay, stay out of the internet.
Yeah.
What does that even mean? I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, and it's hard because AI is not going to go through one physical piece of hardware. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And without that being the case, there's no way to have like just a off.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen.
We got to turn off the internet.
And the other thing, this is where it becomes like even a political conversation as much as an ethical one, which is that like obviously we have no laws or anything in place to facilitate the advancement of AI, and that's kind of terrifying because whoever the first person is to come up with some super advanced piece of AI technology, obviously they're going to capitalize on that, and they're going to make sure that they have full control over it, and they're going to give little regard to the individual emotions of people. They're going to just want to advance it for themselves. And
so what do you mean by that? I'm not sure what you mean. Where are you going?
I just don't, you don't want it to turn into some iRobot example where it's like, I don't know if that's a good example, but like if you have one domain controlling the growth and advancement and integration of AI into our society, like, I don't know, like if you...
Yeah, but
how do I word this?
Yeah, because could you do that? I don't even think...
could you do that? I mean, of course.
I mean, like, so this person has invented this specific algorithm, because like this happens in computers all the time. Somebody will invent some algorithm, and like people sometimes try to patent algorithms. In general, like you can't. I mean, like you can patent very, very specific ones, but somebody else could independently come up with it. So like,
while that's true, the growth of something like AI is exponential over time. And so the first person, that's why I said the first person that does it, their artificial intelligence is going to experience exponential growth. And by the time the next person is able to copy their original algorithm, it's over. You know what I mean? Because at some point, at some point the complexity of the AI software is going. We have to acknowledge that it will be outside of the control of human programmers. Like it will be. Somehow we can influence the direction, but at some point it'll be so complex in its ability to write its own software that like we can't rewrite that algorithm that was able. This is already true. Like
the Google search algorithms are like interesting, and like again it gets a little bit political because some people say that they're like banned or shadow banned or whatever.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
like the people running the algorithms, actually that's part of it. It's like the people running the algorithms don't necessarily know what their next inputs are going to do. Like so like they might be able to like quote unquote affect the algorithm decisions because they're trying to say, I don't know, like I don't even have any good examples. I was reading some books about it, but like I don't have any great examples. But like because of that emergent behavior, because it is so, I think I see what you're saying. Everything about it is so complex and it's constantly reading new data. So like if somebody comes in and does try to encourage it in one way, you won't necessarily get the outcome that you expect. And this is like happening right now.
Yeah. I think the direction you're going with that isn't exactly what I meant in the beginning, but that's a good point. The point that I'm trying to make is that it's important to talk about the first person that does it right, because like I said, this thing will experience exponential growth. Who knows? Maybe it will double its logical capability daily or hourly or minutely. I don't know. It's going to get really, really quick though.
I mean, that, like I said, that chess program, Deep Blue, they didn't teach it to play chess.
That's a good point. That the chess thing and the little dinosaur game, in less than a day, both of these things were capable of multiplying their intelligence by a factor of billions of trillions, zillions of percents.
Yeah, because they can go through so many. That's number crunching. They can go through so many iterations.
Yes, and humans just cannot do that.
Yeah.
So the point that I'm trying to make is humans can't do that, and we should accept that. So one thing that we are not good at really is crunching data quickly and iterating quickly. I mean, dude, we even talked about this in the last episode about just even managing a software company is insane because iteration is hard for humans. Like we're not very quick at it. I mean, we like to think we are, but we're not. And it takes us a really long time to master things that a robot could learn very quickly. I mean, something as simple as, I don't know, even swinging a sword. There's like an art to that, and getting good at something like that might be like really hard. I don't know why I came up with that example, but
because you were swinging your sword earlier today.
Oh yes, of course. Yeah, I was outside doing
sword swinging practice.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I don't know, maybe throwing a baseball, throwing a football,
firing a gun.
These are things that you have to do a lot of times to get good at, whereas you let AI do that and it's just going to like, boom, one shot. The amount of data that it can collect from that one shot in a gun, for example, is so much more than the data you will collect.
Yeah.
I mean, people say that like with guns, you have to go spend hundreds of hours at a range to be really comfortable with a firearm. Or the same thing goes for baseball. You have to throw 1,000 baseballs to get any sort of good at it, whereas AI could do it really quickly. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that once AI gets a grasp on, I'm talking about this in the form of like AI. I don't want to say like as a human, but as a very intelligent being that very much understands the world it exists in. Right now, we don't really have that. Like, it might understand a particular task, but it doesn't understand the world.
Yeah.
Once we get to a point where it does start to understand the world, its ability to collect data on the world will grow so exponentially that original algorithm was really important. That was written by humans, obviously. Yeah. The original algorithm that allowed it to start collecting data was impressive, but by day 7, it will be like so far beyond what the humans wrote that the humans won't even be able to understand it.
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying is, imagine if it takes a set of humans a year to write the original algorithm of the first company. Don't even bother. Like it's pointless. Mm-hmm. You will not catch up unless you can somehow find a way to steal whatever that thing has learned. And so I'm just saying that's kind of a terrifying thing because we have no oversight on that. We have no. This isn't a conversation that we have.
But what do you think the consequences are? I guess that's the next question. So, like, what's the thing that you are worried about in this situation?
The consequences are that there's companies all the time that have
Oh, because
nefarious intent, like just capitalistic. It's not that I have a problem with capitalism, but it does sometimes come at the cost of whatever human happiness. Like, I mean, things happen because people are greedy, and they end up hurting society as a whole. This happens all the time. We kind of talked about, I don't know if it was on the podcast, but we talked about this before, where like small example was like the Galveston oil spill. They knew that thing was going to blow. They knew they could not maintain that. Was it you that I talked about this? Maybe it wasn't you. No. Yeah, that's a small example of those people were just greedy for oil. They just wanted money. And in general, again, I have no problem with capitalism. I think it's probably
that's okay. Yeah, but also that's not just a capitalist thing. Socialism does that too. Like the USSR, like they would do that. They have like the Soviet Union back in the day. They would happily like sacrifice a lake or whatever, which might kill all the fish, because it's like, oh well, we're just going to divert this thing. So I agree with you, but also I do think it's interesting. It's not just a capitalist thing.
You're right, and actually that proves the point even more.
Yeah.
Then that you are very correct. It doesn't matter what the entity is that is greedy. The entity that is greedy will oftentimes sacrifice or build something at the consequence of.
They have, like, the fact is, no matter what the system is, they have interests.
Exactly.
And if some other entity has opposing interests, like the bigger one, like in the case of like sometimes corporations or like governments, like they might sacrifice other people's interest in favor of their own.
And if you're the first person to create this all-knowing AI, I mean, you are in a powerful position.
That's a good point.
And you're going to capitalize on it. I think I said capitalize. Capitalize doesn't necessarily infer capitalism.
Yeah, but you're going to use it
capitalize too.
Yeah, you're going to use it for whatever your particular interests are.
Yeah. It's funny, actually. I don't want to go down this whole rabbit hole, but it's funny that capitalize seems to infer capitalism, but it doesn't. It's just kind of human nature. And we kind of talked about this before. Capitalism, I know a lot of people think it's unfair, and I do understand why. And it sometimes isn't great for everybody, but it's the most natural system. Like even socialists, for example, are going to capitalize on the power that they have. They're gonna. That's capitalism. I mean, you might be socialist, but
it has happened in every, like, in now we are getting into politics.
Even communists, like the communist parties, are going to capitalize on the power that they have.
Everybody, like, that's the thing. It's like people in North Korea. I used to live in South Korea. People in North Korea, like the government, they're all rich and they eat well.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, like they have food, and it's the same thing in I forget the numbers, but like in Venezuela, like the daughter of the president is like, I don't know if it was a billionaire. It was some high number, but it's like people are starving. But it's like interesting. The daughter of the president, who doesn't run a company, is super wealthy. So.
Yeah, it's just like the natural thing that humans do. So you were saying, what's the concern?
Yeah.
To me, that's the concern.
That's
what
fair.
What are the odds that the first company that does it is this super ethical, moral, considerate?
Yeah. The fact is, just like anything else, it can be a weapon. That's your big concern. Weapon, maybe not necessarily in like destructive power, like killing people, like a nuke, but it gives a massive imbalance in power.
Yeah,
like
and it can be destructive.
Yeah. So yeah, it's like it can be, of course, right? It's the same thing. Let's talk about like Iron Man, for example, right? Like Tony Stark was the first person to build that suit, and again, luckily in the comic books he's like a nice person, but yeah, like if it would have been somebody else, then the world was in trouble. Actually, there's an interesting comic. Do you know Superman Red Sun?
No.
Okay. So Superman, obviously, like he was an alien. He crash landed in like Kansas, and he was raised by like some sweet, like down to earth, like country family, and they raised him really well, and so he saves people. In Red Sun, he lands 12 hours later.
Okay.
And he lands in Soviet Russia.
Oh, on the other side of the world.
In the other side of the world, yeah, right. That's why it's 12 hours later.
I see.
So he becomes like a servant of like the communist system, and he takes over. He helps take over the world.
Interesting.
Like, yeah, it was a fun comic. Yeah. Anyway, but it is. So now I was curious what you were talking about. Obviously, like that is a weapon, but it's like it's something that could be used for good or not. So I see what you mean. Like the fact is, that first person or that first algorithm that gets there is going to be powerful, and it's going to be, again, because it's exponential, how does the next one catch up? So how would we equalize? And maybe we can't.
I mean, we like the world we live in right now. We fight each other a lot less now with bullets and explosives. I mean, that's not gone. Obviously, it's very tragic that we still do that. But we fight each other. You could do more damage with intellectual attacks than you can with destructive physical attacks. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh, yeah.
it's all over the news all the time. Like, there was this spy, there was this data breach, there was this, I don't know, whatever. Like,
I mean, if
they hacked into the DNC or
yeah,
whatever.
if
like,
somebody hacked into like the power grid and shut that down,
yeah,
there would be panic. If we just didn't have power for weeks, like we would be destroyed from the inside.
I mean, imagine, yeah, if you just let this AI entity run loose and it starts learning the interworkings of everything, and it starts to not necessarily do it, but it learns how to exploit the systems that we have in place. And
Yeah.
it's like, imagine if you are the guy
Yeah.
in control of this. And it's like, hey man, you can literally do whatever you want to do. You want to shut down the grid to this place? We could do that.
You want all the money in banks?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the thing is like, again, that's like the prison. Like if I don't know anything about hacking, right? And so I'm gonna assume that most people, even good hackers, are gonna have difficulty hacking into banks, right? Maybe some of the best hackers could hack into banks. I don't even know what that means. Like, let's say there's software vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
But now imagine like some smart AI who obviously sees stuff different than a person, who can utilize multiple, like, millions of computers around the world to figure out all the permutations of whatever this security, even just like hacking passwords. It's like, so it's like you could do that for every single one and then just siphon cents, right? Like most people aren't watching I happen to look at my bank account every day.
Yeah.
I budget. So, but still, what would I do? It's like, hey, I'm missing 18 cents. I have no idea why. Or like, I'm missing $18. Some people wouldn't even notice that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like that person could become very rich very fast.
Yeah. It's just, that's what I'm saying. Like, if there's not some sort of oversight, and I don't even know where that comes from, because like I would say, I guess it should be in the hands of the government, but that also sounds terrifying.
Well, yeah, I because the problem is,
It's like, who has control of this?
who was talking about, somebody was talking, I think, to Mark Zuckerberg, like in those like he was in some hearings, and they were saying like, do you store cookies for your users or whatever? And they were just asking that blanket question. He's like, well, yeah, like we store some cookies related to so they can log in. It's like, do you store cookies? Do you have cookies or whatever? And like Mark Zuckerberg was like, it's like every website has cookies.
Yeah.
And so it's like, but they didn't care and they didn't know. And so this was somebody else's commentary, but they were like looking at Zuck's face and going like, he was trying to decide how much he should spend explaining the internet to like a congressperson.
Yeah.
And I didn't watch that part. I do think it was funny though, because yeah, like, do we want to put non-tech people in charge of like do we want to put some government like bureaucrats in charge of AI, this really important thing, but they don't know anything about tech? Well, that seems bad. Okay, well, like, what's the alternative then? Putting private companies.
And it's also be bad.
That could also be bad, because the fact is, yeah, like you said, it's like a big, powerful. I mean, again, there is debate right now on the internet about like, is Google serving different content in different countries, like, or like, like,
aren't they like admittedly doing that?
I mean,
Didn't they like sign a deal with China where they like?
Oh yeah, no, definitely that, but no, but like so for example, when Tulsi Gabbard, it was like after like the first presidential debate, Tulsi Gabbard, she was running ads on YouTube, and like they canceled their ads, and like if you were searching for Tulsi Gabbard on YouTube, immediately after, like the search results wouldn't show up for some reason. Like none of the search results were like her direct channel. But if you used a VPN and you were signed in from like Germany and you searched the exact same thing, you would find the correct stuff.
No way.
Yeah.
And we're back on. Say something?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
I don't know exactly what happened. That's going to be frustrating to splice back together.
Oh, yeah.
Our mic cut out real quick. anyways, okay, yeah. So that's crazy. So they were serving different content to certain regions. That's
Yeah, yeah.
Does Google owe anybody anything? Do they owe it to anybody to be honest and
Here's
unbiased?
here's the I mean, that's part of the debate, and that's why some of these I'm not an expert on this either, but that's some of the debate about. That's why like Facebook and Twitter and all these people are getting like under attack by like Ted Cruz and stuff like that. Because one of the things is they mark themselves as there's some Bill Clinton did something. It's like Section 230 of the Communications Act, where it's like you mark yourself as a platform or a publisher, right? And so like these companies are like a platform. So like the phone company is a platform. So even if I went to jail, like the phone company can't deny me service, and they can't be listening and saying, oh well, you talk too much about programming, so we're not gonna do that, right? So that's where the debate is now. I don't know enough about any of this. I don't follow the politics exactly, and I don't. I guess maybe I do because you didn't know about this either. I don't think I follow it that much, and I don't know about the law either. But that is where the debate is. So the question is, does Google owe it to people?
According to U.S. law, they do.
Maybe that's at least where something could go.
Because
And like
in a truly capitalist system, they don't really owe anybody anything.
well, yeah, I mean it depends, right? Because like also like some of these places like I'm trying to think because something happened with Patreon as well, where I mean there is still an issue if you are violating if somebody gets kicked off without actually violating terms of service, right? It's like,
But that's according to law, not capitalism. Which maybe they're not just mutually exclusive. Like maybe you have to have one with the other. I just mean that like the idea is that if there's a company that's discriminating or then you have the right to not use that system.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
But we're at a weird time, right? Because like these companies are so big that it seems like they cannot fail, but that might not be true. Like throughout history, really big entities do fall. And in the past, they've most often been like political entities or governing entities, but now, I mean, some of these private companies are just as powerful, it seems like, or they're getting there. They're pretty dang close.
Yeah. I forget why it seems like we went down a crazy corner, but
what were we talking about? We got distracted by the thing cutting off. I think,
I think originally. Oh yeah, I know what it was. Because originally we were talking about, do we want non-tech government bureaucrats running this super ultra sensitive tech thing? And so ideally, hopefully they are neutral. Like, but the problem is they don't know tech. The tech companies are smaller and run as obviously like a company with like a CEO at the top. So it's hard to necessarily say they might be altruistic, but maybe not, right? So then, like, if it's run by a company, that means effectively it's run by a CEO or like a board or whatever. So it's like, is that guaranteed to be neutral? But I mean, there's no answer.
So here's what's going to happen. Almost certainly, here's what's going to happen. What would you say is the most threatening entity on the planet?
Like, you mean like I don't even understand the question.
Entity? The answer is like the U.S. government or just government in general is probably the most threatening thing on the planet. They have nuclear bombs. They're terrifying. Like there's nothing more terrifying than that.
Yeah.
So
more people have been killed. Oh, I'm gonna get this messed up. But more people have been killed by their own governments in the 20th century than like through governmental wars.
That seems like that could very much be true. But here's the point I'm trying to make. That's the most threatening thing we've got right now. And for sure, if some private company comes out with some crazy AI system and we start to realize the threat that it could impose, the government's going to have an issue with that because they're going to realize, oh, dang, like this is getting a little bit out of control. Yeah, we might have bombs and guns and all this stuff, but like at some point, if this thing is intellectually smart enough, it can beat us, even with what we've got. I mean, we could try to EMP it or nuke it, but let's kind of rule that out for now. So the thing that I'm trying to point out is that we don't want to get there, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be reactive. The government's going to realize what's happening, and then they're going to want to take control of it after the fact, which is all terrifying. Still terrifying.
We don't want to give that power to the government either.
Yeah, we don't want to give to the government either, and we don't want to be reactive to it. We want to be proactive. That way, we are facilitating the development of this technology. So, how do you do that? Because I don't think letting a private company do it's good, because then it serves the interest of... The thing is, this thing... If you're going to create something smarter than humans, you need buy-in from everybody, like across the planet, even ignoring boundaries of countries. Like everybody needs buy-in. And there's no way we're going to get 100% of people to agree.
Yeah.
But it does feel like we're a race. I mean, we kill each other, but still at the end of the day, like there has to be a decision made among all of us. Like, are we going to pursue this? Probably. Okay, fine. So we're going to pursue it. We need to have some entity like... I'm not saying the UN should do it, but something like the UN that is agreed on by all countries, and we say these are the people that are going to push this forward, and we're always going to review them. They're going to be elected into position. You know what I mean? Like
I do, but it's...
Well, go ahead.
Oh, it's just really funny because you were like, I think this podcast has answered your questions. Why do people care about this, and what do they think is going to happen? We talked about the ethics of it, but now we're talking about why it's scary.
Yeah.
It is funny, like...
Well, so here's the problem. I know there's going to be people out there that are going to say, I even know some people that come to mind right now that would say this. They would hate my proposed idea of having some government entity or some global entity that all countries elect into position. Like there's going to definitely be people that'll be like, well, I'd rather just have the US do it. We'd rather just the US be in charge of this. Likely if the world keeps going the way that it is, the U.S. probably would be the first person to do it, just based on the fact that for the last century, it seems like a lot of the new technology has come out of the U.S. Could be somewhere else, but it just seems likely that it'd be the U.S. So I know there's going to be people that want to push the interest of their country over another one. I understand why. I don't know that I agree with that, though. I do think that this comes down to a race. As far as we know, we're the smartest thing that exists. And if we're going to put something into the world that's smarter than us, we need buy-in from everybody. And we need to have some system where everybody can elect people into position. Plus, it'll be better that way because there's a lot of talent in the U.S., but there's also a lot of talent around the world. And so I don't just want the best programmers from the U.S. I want the best programmers from around the world to make sure that we are building this in a very safe, stable, and in a way that it can be shut down if needed.
Yeah. How do you control that, though?
It's so hard
because
you have to be proactive. We can't, because I know right now there's a lot of people that's going to be like, let the private companies do it, but like we cannot let that happen.
But the thing is, so that's what I mean. So how do you stop that? Because like let's say we have that, and let's say we build like the UN for AI, whatever we call it, right? So it's like, okay. No, just like I think I assumed that there's rules like no biological weapons. We don't want people to have biological weapons. That seems very dangerous for us. Well, of course we don't let people have nukes, and we try to regulate people's nuke programs, right? But like nuke programs seems like nuclear programs and possibly biological weapons might be even easier to discover.
What do you mean by that?
I don't know about biological weapons, but like nuclear radiation gives off a signature that we might be able to detect from space. So it's like we might be able to know where people are storing that kind of stuff. Maybe. I don't know. People might be able to do it underground, under mountains and stuff like that. But like there might be some indications of people having like even just like tracking movements. But it's like, how do you track, like what if some company in Russia, just some small company, is like developing some AI? It's like, how would you know? It's like we might have the rule, okay, for the next 20 years nobody does anything with AI. How do you? That's the problem. It's like, is there even a way to know if somebody is doing it? And they might say, okay, like, well, I still want cool technology, so I'm gonna do like my Alexa, and I'm still gonna make video game AI.
Yep.
And it's like, oh, whoops, I accidentally did this thing.
Yep, you're right. You're so right. Because
it's tough.
Yeah, because there's no way, like, you can make it illegal to develop AI outside of that global entity that I'm talking about, but by the time you've found out that they're doing that, it's too late. Your nukes and your guns and your bombs, they're not going to save you.
Yeah.
Like that, it sounds so dark, but it's true. Like if that thing just gets, if it just gets any time at all to start observing the world, I mean, the first thing that it's going to do is, I mean, at least I think if you were going to program this thing, one of the things that you would program into it is self-preservation. Like, so if it's threatened, not only self-preservation of that thing, of that AI, but also self-preservation of you. And so if you're scared that like once this comes out that the US government's going to threaten me with guns and death, and you're going to program self-preservation, hey, find out how to make sure that they can't do that. Because if you have the smartest thing on the planet, how hard can it be?
This is the plot of so many movies.
I know.
Like this is Avengers 2, Age of Ultron.
Yeah.
Like that's exactly it. Some AI like took over. Yeah.
Man.
And so many. Obviously, like Upgrade, we were talking about that. Yeah.
Maybe Elon Musk's proposal of, because man, it just seems inevitable, right? Like it's going to happen. So his proposal is the Neuralink thing where you supplement your own brain by implanting like a chip in your brain, like literally like the movie you're just talking about. Maybe that's the best, because then at least it levels the playing field.
At least we are them and they are us.
Yeah. And it levels the playing field, because now you don't have to do it, hopefully. But if you do, then you get access to the same intelligence that anybody else does.
Yeah.
That seems the most fair. But, I mean, still, somebody out there is going to want to have the best. And again, it compounds so... The intelligence of a computing system compounds so quickly that, like, in a matter of minutes, you could be leagues ahead of the next best one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? God, it's just so crazy. I knew that this conversation was going to go like this. I just don't know.
I didn't know. Here's what I thought we were going to talk about today. I thought we were talking more about automation, because, like, you had said the reason we talked about this in the first place was, like, in the last podcast, you were talking about automation, and I don't want to get anything controversial. And so I thought we were talking about that, about people worried about losing jobs, which I disagree with. I mean, some people will lose jobs. That's it. That's truth. But I think I think more jobs come from technology.
Yeah.
And that's obvious if you look back in history, right? When we didn't have plows and tractors and stuff, and then we built those things, and it's like maybe we have less farmers now, but they can farm more, which frees people up to do other stuff. Anyway, I thought that was the direction we were going.
Yeah.
We've been talking about philosophy and some politics, and I'm having a good time.
Yeah. It's such a fascinating conversation, because it's something that's so misunderstood by a lot of the world, and by no means am I an expert on the topic, but I definitely I can see where this is going very quickly, and I just wish people would be more proactive. But the problem is there's so many people that get put in a platform, even bigger than this platform. I mean, our audience isn't as big as like a TED Talk, and there's people that talk about it there. And it just seems like every time people are like, well, it's this same message of let's be prepared, let's be proactive, let's start thinking about this now, let's start having this conversation now. But nothing comes of it. There's no action items. Nobody's doing anything.
Well, to be fair, I don't know if either of us know that nobody's doing anything either.
That's true.
Because you probably do. Obviously, you knew what we were talking about today. You probably have looked into this a whole lot more than me. I just don't.
You are right. You're right that we don't know if there's anything anybody's doing. But what I do know is, as of right now, except for the technology available to me, there's nothing stopping me from building it.
Yeah. That's fair.
I mean, how do I know that there's not a group of people somewhere in a basement building the next iRobot? I don't. And there's nothing stopping them. And like we just said, even if people are having a conversation about it, there's been nothing put in place, because it would seem to be that it would have to be. I mean, unless the government's position on it right now is that, like, well, we have like EMPs or something, and we can shut down any technological system that's gotten out of hand because we have EMPs. I mean, maybe that's their solution, the brute force approach.
Maybe I'm gonna start going down the I don't know what rabbit hole it is. Could Could you write a website that knows how to? The problem is I don't even know enough about this. Could you build something on a website? Because obviously, like when you serve, when you go to the website on your computer, you're downloading somebody's JavaScript,
Mm-hmm.
and that JavaScript is running on their computer. Can you then? I think like the web protocols prevent this. Can you then send something to other computers, unknown computers?
What do you mean?
I don't know. So like obviously the front end is able to make a secondary or like a request back to your back end,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you have it make a request? And of course you can. You can have it make a request to any other computer. I'm wondering if you could like, how could you build a like, let's say like self-replicating? So like I want to, no, I just use no.
You're saying how is it possible for you to have a server that can execute a piece of logic on some random computer through the web?
Something like that.
I don't
think so. Yeah. So my question is stupid even on the surface.
Well,
Yeah.
I think the answer is no, but there's a specific reason for it, which is this is gonna maybe show or not show my understanding of how this works, but I'm pretty sure that like the operating system and the networking, the networking of your home or whatever is designed to prevent that from happening.
Mm-hmm.
So like in theory, maybe you could have a computing device that would allow that, or a network that would allow that, but the average Windows computer, Mac, and home network is not designed to allow that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Could I have a website where somebody comes to the website and I'm running some logic, and then I make a request because it's just a request? What else could you do? Could I make a request? Of course, I could do this. Let's say I own two backends. They come to this one. They come to the one thing that looks just like a website. Of course, I could have it make a request to this other backend that I own that isn't like this is just another server that I own, and it can do communication.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like somebody else's computer, by the nature of visiting my website, somebody else's computer is acting as like the go-between. They could potentially, I mean, you could do that.
Yeah, I mean, like if I don't know if this is what you mean, but if you had a website that's already being visited that has some other purpose,
Yeah.
you could. You
could
through JavaScript or whatever, you can force a computer to communicate logic back to your website. I mean, you do it through API calls and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking.
So you could definitely do that, but they would have to make the initial request.
They'd have to visit.
Computer.
They'd have to visit your website.
Yeah.
I never thought about that. Seems.
Let me throw this out there. I think I know what point you're trying to make, and yeah, let me put this out there. This idea of utilizing a bunch of hosts to solve a computational problem already exists in the form of cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
If there is some monetary incentive to get people to run logic on their computer, then people will do it.
Mm-hmm.
And people do this with Bitcoin already. And the cool thing about Bitcoin is like that system is replicatable. Is that a word?
Yeah.
In a lot of different cryptocurrencies.
I think they just call it replicable though.
Replicable. Yeah, but a lot of cryptocurrencies do that same thing. And the reason that it's valuable is because for solving some problem, you get a portion of the pie. And it's like the value of Bitcoin, for example, is just like completely arbitrary. Like it's only worth what somebody's willing to pay you for a piece of that pie, but it happens to be popular, so it happens to be worth quite a bit of money. But anybody can make a cryptocurrency, and it could be pennies for the whole pie, but because nobody's interested in that one, it's not a popular one. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is if that's where your brain is going, it seems possible that like...
I was just thinking like nefarious hacking, for example. What if I made a really cool game and people like in browser game and people are playing and they're like playing for hours, and secretly behind the scenes what that code is also doing, obviously, like it's trying to hack a government or something like that. Now, obviously that's traceable as well because unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, that code lives on that person's computer. So like people would be able to find out that I was doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Can you? No, I don't think you can do this. If somebody visits my website, can I do something to delete my own code after? I don't think I can do that either. Can I like clear their cache or wherever like the JavaScript is running?
It feels like this problem has to have already been solved.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that there's ways of like obfuscating the code in a way that like it would more or less just be unreadable anyways. So maybe.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess anything is unobfuscatable with
That's
a powerful
yeah.
enough system. So what was the point? I was just about to say something and I'm blanking now.
Because I was talking about hacking.
I lost it. Dang.
Okay, no big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, I just wonder. There's just, well, on the topic of like having computational hardware available to do something like that. Oh, I know the point I was going to make. Because I was going to say like hardware is cheap these days. Like getting really powerful hardware is, and you can rent it if you've got the money. Plus, a lot of people in the world have a lot of money. So if you want a lot of computational power, because you know you've got this thing already built that all it needs is hardware, you can get it. Like, I mean, that's not really. I mean, it would be better to have access to every computer in the world, but that would also be a pretty complicated system. The thing that I was going to try to say is one other thing that one possible thing that AI would be able to do, and this is only really possible if the world is actually deterministic, which is another thing that I don't know that we want to chase that rabbit, but. The movie Devs, have you seen, or the show, I mean,
No,
the TV show?
Seen it.
There's a TV show called Devs, and basically the idea of the show is that the show assumes that the world is deterministic, and basically there's this company, it's called Amaya, which is funny.
Yeah,
and
it's interesting.
the goal of the company is to predict the past and the future. And so they basically have this little program. They have like this little bacteria, and it's in the beginning of the show. It's like this little bacteria. It looks like a worm, but I think it is like a bacteria of some sort. And basically, this guy has a computer program running, and he's demoing to the owners. Him and his team created this thing, and it can predict what this living being is going to do because of the fact that it is deterministic based on the show. And so it got me wondering. So the thing is, it predicts what that thing is going to do like 7 seconds into the future, and like they're watching on the left the actual live footage, and then on the right they're seeing what it's going to do. And so they like kind of start to track it over, and they're looking, and like when it turns left and this and that. And so anyways, the guys want to see like how far can you push that. And so this is obviously this is kind of, you're running into like the big O notation here, because the farther into the future you go, it's exponentially more difficult to calculate.
Yeah, because there's so many possibilities.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it got me wondering, in the show, he's just got like a MacBook or something, and it's the thing running the program. But I just wonder, like, how much computational power would it take to predict what something like a bacteria is going to do like 7 seconds into the future by today's standard? You'd have to have so much, like, the computational power you'd have to have would be insane. And the problem we have now, I'm going off on a complete tangent here, but the problem we'd have now is if you were trying to solve that problem by using other people's computers as hosts, you'd have like a latency problem too.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's a whole nother thing. But I do wonder if when somebody really advances AI, if that's something that will be pursued. Right now it seems like we don't even know if the world is deterministic, but that will be something that eventually people will want to pursue, is trying to predict human behavior with computers.
Well, I mean, that's the thing is, like, I guess that's another part of the fear. And like, even just going back to the AI, and we were saying, like, the way beginning of our conversation, we were saying AI isn't going to be enough because people aren't just looking for like the fastest and the cheapest. Sometimes people want that art, that experience. So the question is if the AI can predict what people would want, or like what people are going to do, then like, can a computer paint? Yes, right? Of course it can. You could even call a printer. A printer is like the perfect, like, yeah, it's, but okay, so then can a computer create original art? Yeah, you could also say that. Maybe there's no feeling or emotion in it, but where is that feeling and emotion actually coming from? Like, we might not care if the computer felt something if it still makes me feel something. Like for like a new piece of art or something like that. Anyway, that's just like a different.
Well, so here's the thing. If a computer creates an original piece of art, it would have to be based on observations of other art and what humans do and like. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, see, this is where things get interesting, because that computer, whatever it decides to make based on its observations, that is deterministic because it's programmed into it. You can predict what the outcome will be. I mean, it's kind of like it's ironic to even say that because it is deterministic by nature of the way it was programmed to.
Yeah.
Anyways, now if you talk to a human that makes a painting, they would not tell you probably that was based off of their observations. Although that might factor in, but I feel like humans do think, and I don't know the answer to this, but humans do think like, oh, well, there's something inside of me that made that has nothing to do with my observations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that true? Or is everything a learned behavior?
Yeah, I don't know. This is
it's a very philosophical question.
Yeah, because now it's super philosophical. Because here's how I feel about that. I don't have an answer, but people say it's nature and nurture, right? Like, and these two things are like fighting. And like, is it more nature? Is it more nurture? And people don't always know. The less interesting thing, in my opinion, the less interesting thing is the nature, because we can't change that.
We also don't know if it's real.
Yeah. But yeah, exactly. So
right.
Like, so the more interesting thing. So you could say like, well,
there probably is some element of nature, because the construction of your body is going to influence down to the construction of your brain, the construction of your organs. That's going to influence.
If somebody has more testosterone, they might be more likely to act a certain way. If somebody has like some other chemical deficiency, like they might act less or something like that.
That's true. So there is some nature to it.
So there is some, but like if you're taking like an average, like the average expectancy or like the average person, the more interesting thing is the nurture part. Like, did the things that they learn and observe, and like, did that change them, and can they relearn based on new stuff, right? Because you're kind of giving up if you say, well. I mean, actually, Jocko talks exactly about this. He says, some people say, well, I just have a bad temper. That's just me. And Jocko's like, fix that. Like, don't just say that and give up. Work on that.
Yeah.
Like, recognize that. So it's like that's true. Maybe you are more prone to have like emotional, like angry outbursts or whatever. Fix it. You can fix it. Like, don't just accept that.
Yeah. So. But even that, like we said the other episode, sometimes it takes somebody like Jocko telling you that for you to do it, which is like so funny because like part of me wants to believe that there's people have the free will to do whatever it is that they want to do, but it's so easy to look at somebody that is down on their luck, or things just didn't go right for them, or they've got some issue, and just say like, well, he could fix that. Mm-hmm. But it's like, in reality, somebody's got to be the catalyst. Like, some experience in your life has to influence you to do that.
So I 100% agree.
Which is part of the reason why people should just be more
open to experience, like open to learning.
Well, on the receiving end, yes. But I'm saying, I just wish in general people were more willing to, if you see something that could help somebody, help them.
Yeah.
People need to do that more, because I mean, again, like, if somebody's in a rut, they're going to need a catalyst to get out.
Yeah. So that is exactly my experience with money. Again, I don't know how much time we have left because we're going off the rails here, but I just think that me and my family were just very average, like average Americans. My dad always worked hard. He worked his way up and earned a pretty good amount of money. He also I think this is typical Americans, like living paycheck to paycheck and having some debt and stuff like that, right? And so I went to school and I had a large amount of debt. And I remember I was talking with my wife today about this, and I thought that I would just have debt forever. Oh, everyone has debt, whatever. And plus I had like credit card debt. And I was like, how do you even, I didn't even care about it because I just thought like, well, everyone has this. There's nothing I can do to change it. Even though I was living abroad, uh, work was paying for my housing, and you don't have to pay taxes if you make under like $90,000 and you're living abroad for like 350 days out of the year or something. So I didn't have to pay taxes. And I was still struggling. I wasn't like super well paid, but I was, pretty well. And it wasn't until I started reading about like the budgeting people and like Mr. Money Mustache, like the extreme savers that save like 75% of their income.
Mm-hmm.
And more important, because I've never been able to do that. That's also still crazy to me. But more important was learning about the investing portion, about how like your money can make money,
Mm-hmm.
and not just in like trying to start a podcast or whatever. It's just like you put it here and you let other people work on it, and it can compound. And it was just like something clicked for me, and I was like, oh wow, okay.
Yeah.
And I was doing something wrong. And then now I kind of look at people, and I mean, we're out of debt now, which is nice. So I did build my way out of that. But like there was definitely that catalyst of like I was dumb about money and finances, and then it wasn't overnight, but I became smart about it. And
Mm-hmm.
but it was like Mr. Money Mustache helped because he was the extreme example of like save your money and you can retire early. He retired at like 30 or something.
Yeah.
And so like, but that was a catalyst. And I meet people and I go, oh, well, why don't you do stuff like that? Like investing or whatever. Why don't you do stuff like that? That makes so much sense to me now.
Yeah.
So
These internet influencers, man, there's some really cool people out there. Jocko, Mr. Money Mustache, so many. I mean, even people that didn't even start out as influencers. Like, I don't know if like even like Joe Rogan, I would say still like there's a lot of influential stuff that can come out of his podcast too,
yeah.
just by giving people a platform to talk to other people. It's really cool. I think that's super awesome because just 100 years ago, if the family that you lived in didn't nurture you the way that they should, or if for whatever reason just your environment wasn't conducive to self-growth, like you were kind of just screwed.
Yeah.
But in today's world, it's so cool that there's so much that you can absorb from people online that have done
Yeah.
things really well.
Yeah.
And books too. I remember somebody at work, one of the owners had said that like it's so cool that some guy, maybe 50 years old or something, can sit there with everything that he's learned about a particular thing and put it into a handheld thing that you can interpret and understand. And like that's so powerful.
Here's 50 years of even in our narrow field. Here's 30 or 50 years of programming experience. And I'm going to boil it down into these 200 pages. Of course, you don't get all of my experience, but these are the lessons. These are the most core lessons I've learned. Please look at these and also learn too. That I used to tell that to my students. That's why I think it is so important to read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, humans in general, like that's been our whole goal, is from generation to generation to pass down more than they knew before.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, even some of these tools that we've been talking about on this episode are designed to kind of help with that as well. But it is cool because every generation that goes by, exponentially more information is passed down, which is really cool to think about.
Here's something funny in it's really subtle, but I think it lays the groundwork. In the first episode of Star Trek Next Generation, first of all, did you ever take calculus?
I did in high school.
In high school, right? So like what grade? Like how old were you, do you think?
11th or 12th grade.
Yeah, something like that. Okay.
17, 18.
Yeah, so I was I think maybe 10th or 11th grade, same thing. I took pre-calculus first. But yeah, I was also in high school. In this first episode of Star Trek, he's talking to like a 12-year-old or something, or like a 10-year-old, and he's like, Dad, I don't want to go to calculus class. And so the whole point is exactly what you're saying. It's like in the future, like there's so much information to learn that like kids are like learning stuff like the advanced level stuff like even younger.
Yeah.
I thought that was funny.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, even what do they say? Like even over the last couple hundred years, the capacity of the human brain has grown a lot due to natural selection favoring brain capacity over brute strength, which is kind of what it used to be. So I mean, if it continues to go that way, I mean, who knows? And like, dude, kids these days, what they're able to learn is insane. Like,
Yeah.
dude, I mean, you just through the internet. Like, I've got a couple little cousins that just one thing that they really like is like Minecraft, and the creativity that they had at a young age playing that game is just mind blowing. Like, how do you know? Like, I get Minecraft is a kid's game, and it's like it's not like building things in the real world, but like in some ways there is some like architectural engineering type of thing that is associated with what they can build, and a lot of it's based on watching other people build on YouTube. And I'm just thinking like, yeah, just 100 years ago, what a kid is capable of is based on his environment, and there's not a lot available to a child 100 years ago. But now what they can do by just researching and learning, and like kids want to do it, like kids want to learn, like it's so
Yeah. Related to that, it's kind of like, I forget this guy's name. He's in all of these books. The first guy to beat the 4-minute mile. Before that guy beat that first 4-minute mile, people, like scientists, thought it was impossible. Impossible for the human body to do that. Then he did it, and then the same year, like 10 other people did it. And I think that's the same thing. Like, some of these concepts. Were you telling me about like the egg thing, standing the egg? It doesn't matter.
so.
Okay, so I'm not going to tell that story. It's the mile thing, okay? It's like, and so years ago, like in like ancient Greek times, they didn't necessarily have the concept of zero or negative, like negative numbers. Negative numbers didn't make sense to them, right? I don't know if it was Greek time, but it's maybe even Greeks, because, whatever. But once we have those concepts, like we can build off of them, and we can easily take those things for granted, and that's why. So it kind of speeds up, and so it's the same thing. Like a kid playing Minecraft alone for the first time might be like, oh, I don't know what to build. But then you start seeing all this other stuff that other people build, and it's just like, okay.
And it's all out there, and it's all free.
Yeah.
Even like gravity, like Isaac Newton figuring out gravity. Before him, that would have just been like, what? But now it's like so easy to understand.
Yeah.
That's the crazy thing, is just like, if you think about how much smarter the average human is now, then I'm sure that like, if you were to take a human from today and place him in the 1st century AD or whatever, like these people would have thought you are just an alien.
These
like,
are the wizards.
This guy is.
How do you know?
You wouldn't even think that was possible.
Yeah.
It does crack me up, because humans are obviously getting better and better every year. And I remember when what's his name? Thor just did the deadlift.
Yeah.
It was so funny hearing the guys that were narrating that whole thing, like or the commentating the thing. They were saying that while Thor had just lifted whatever it was, I think it was 1 ton. I think right or something like that. Or
I have it written down. Yeah.
Whatever it was that the other guy did.
I thought it was like 502 kilograms or something like that.
Yeah, maybe it was a half ton or
something
half
like that. Yeah.
Whatever, doesn't matter. He just did barely more than the other guy.
Just like 1 kilo more or something.
Yeah, it was just to be a jerk or whatever. But anyways, it was funny hearing the commentators say that, like, well, while Thor just did this amount, the actual scientific capacity of a man is blah, blah, blah. And you're just like, how can you say that? Because we keep breaking those records. Like, it's not even worth saying. Like, humans are going to get stronger. They're going to get smarter. They're going to don't even put boundaries on it, because who knows where we're going to be.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's crazy, but yeah, I don't know. It's really cool. It's really awesome seeing where humans are going and how much better we're getting at passing information along. Again, like what a kid pretty soon, probably even now, there might be some kids, teenagers or less, that can even program Pong. I remember I was making little games in Scratch as a kid, and that's so cool too, because just 30 years prior to that, it was a feat of engineering to even get that game built. So anyways, what do you think? Have we exhausted the topic of AI?
We certainly stopped talking about AI, but we talked about some cool stuff. But yeah, I think that's good.
We did. What was it that you were saying that you wanted to, that you thought we were, I thought automation.
Yeah, I thought that you were talking about, like, because some people are worried about AI and automation because it's losing jobs. Like, if you look at it if you look at a snapshot, like you go into Smith's or Albertsons or whatever, they have like the the computer checkout, like self checkout, which you could kind of call that automation in a certain way, right? Like you don't need the person scanning. So that seems like, well, 6 people just lost their job or whatever, 5 people, because you only need one person to run like 6 stations. So I think that people are worried about that, and they're worried that as AI gets better, we don't need people to do these like lower level jobs anymore. Whatever that means. But I just disagree with that. Well, no, not that exactly. I agree with that. But I think, again, if we look through history, then like there's been a net gain in jobs, like
And in quality of life.
and in quality of life. But like there wasn't app programmers 20 years ago. There wasn't iOS programmers, and like there's certainly less programmers.
There's a lot of jobs like that.
Yeah.
Well, hey, let's pick up on it then next week.
Okay, cool.
Let's
Let's
use
talk
that
about
as
that.
we'll kind of continue the conversation a little bit. That kind of ties in a little bit with AI anyways, so that'll be a fun conversation to continue on.
Cool.
Yeah. So anyways, as always, check us out on social media.
Yeah.
I
We're on Twitter, even though I've been way not active. I think right now YouTube is probably our most active thing because we're at least posting videos.
Yeah, and we're starting to post more video.
Yeah.
Yeah. So cool. Well, like I said, as always, I love everybody tuning in. Every new subscriber that we get, every new viewer is really cool to us. We're just trying to spread the word and be as objective to all this stuff as possible.
Yeah.
And
if you have any questions on Twitter or on YouTube, leave, or if you like it, or if you think we're dumb because we don't know anything about AI, leave that comment too, because I'm curious. I'd love to hear about that.
absolutely. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see y'all next week.
See you next week.